Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is March 5th, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, first things first, I wanted to discuss an assessment from the Institute of War that came out yesterday. And according to their assessment, is that the Ukrainian forces are far more likely to withdraw than to become encircled, and that the Ukrainians might still be able to hold their positions in Bakhmut if they decide to continue defending it. And so this is good news in the sense that from what I've seen in the videos the last couple of days have been thrown around the social media websites, is that the Ukrainians are not doing a massive withdrawal from Bakhmut and they are doubling down on their defense. And so if we look at the map as well, you can see that the last couple of days have stabilized around Bakhmut. So the biggest gains that the Russians have gotten is around the end of February. And so since end of February, while the Russians still continued pushing, but their main push has been outside, as you can see, of Bakhmut. So around Berhivka, Yehidne, they're trying to push towards Dubovo-Vasilivka, which is one of the small settlements here, close to Berhivka. But apart from that, they have not been able to continue pushing and getting ground in Bakhmut. However, the situation still remains very dangerous for the Ukrainian forces, as now the current territory, the last remaining stretch that they control is about, let me calculate it, about 4 kilometers. So you can see that there's the two remaining roads, one that goes to Krumove, to Bakhmut, and the one through Ivanivske, the 20504 highway, is still under Ukrainian control, but now the Russians have complete visibility and fire control over these two roads, which makes it very dangerous for the Ukrainians to continue resupplying Bakhmut. So we'll see next couple of days, if not weeks, if the Ukrainians finally decide to withdraw. I still think it would be the right move, but I still understand why they have decided to continue defending Bakhmut. Perhaps it's a planned, defense to allow slow withdrawal from the Ukrainian troops, which I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to do that. But if they completely commit to defending Bakhmut, I also understand, because there's been so many lives lost on the Ukrainian side. To defend Bakhmut and to withdraw would be a huge morale loss and a huge morale boost for the Wagner units that have been, catastrophically, that have spent catastrophic amounts of units here to take a city of 70,000 people. But I'm confident that whatever happens, if the Ukrainians decide to withdraw from Bakhmut eventually, that they'll be able to come back in the next few months and take it back with this eventual spring counteroffensive. That's going to happen somewhere around early April, mid-April. So that's the situation in Bakhmut. Now, the other front line that the Russians have started is the other offensive that the Russians have started is in Avdiivka. And here there's reports that the Russians have also had catastrophic losses. Lots of units were lost here last week or so, with many videos confirming that they've lost, throughout their days long offensives, many tanks, units. They're having no success here, but they're also counting on pushing the Ukrainians from Avdiivka here. So that's that for Avdiivka. And Vuhledar, which is also another catastrophic front for the Russians. I've mentioned it many times. The current commander of this offensive here is Muradov. And, he's been awarded by Putin some sort of medal for whatever, but you can see that he's no commander, because he's sent thousands of men to certain death, and he's also destroyed one of the most elite, and I'm quoting that in the air, elite units from the Russian army. And I guess they're not elite anymore because they don't exist. Their combat effectiveness has been pretty much reduced to zero. So that's that. In terms of the map situation, as you can see here, the ISW also discusses the fact that Shoigu, the defense minister, is meeting with this colonel, the general Rustam Muradov, and he's likely to assess the extent of the Russian losses around Vuhledar. So I bet you that Muradov is going to be downplaying the losses and telling Shoigu that he needs more weapons, he needs more soldiers, and he's so very close to taking Vuhledar. He just needs more manpower and more vehicles, 100%. So now I have two great news. So the two Ukrainian pilots have come to the United States, more specifically in Arizona, to train on the F-16s. Or the United States is going to be assessing their capabilities in training on the F-16s. But everybody knows that this is the first step into actually learning how to fly jet fighters. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few weeks, more and more of these Ukrainian soldiers, I should say, pilots, are going to be heading to the United States and start training on these F-16s. I'm a huge fan of the F-16s just because of how many there are around the world, and how many of them are operated, not only in the United States, but across many other countries, which makes them, very desirable jet fighters because of how many of them are available, how many spare parts exist, and how, this would also harmonize the Ukrainian forces into becoming more of a NATO army, which would be able to operate, modern NATO-bound jet fighters. So that's really important. So I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the next few months the Ukrainians will come back with F-16s on the Ukrainian airports. That would be really great, and especially extremely important for the spring counteroffensive and the summer counteroffensive. These are going to be crucial into destroying anti-air defense systems, the Russian air defense systems, and also launching the GLSDBs, because I think that you can also launch them from jet fighters, and their Ranger is going to be much further, 150 kilometers plus, which is going to be able to reach even Crimea. So that's going to be very, very game changing if Ukraine is going to be able to get a hold of these jet fighters. And the other good news is that the United Kingdom has pledged now to provide twice as many tanks, the Challenger 2s, to Ukraine. So they pledged to a company of tanks a few months ago, early January, about 14 of them, and now it's going to be 28. So including the 28 Challenger 2s, Ukraine is also going to be getting 33 AS-90s, the self-propelled howitzers. And right now, the Ukrainians are already training in the last few weeks on these Challenger 2s, on these AS-90s in Britain, and so it's just in time for the spring counteroffensive. So they're going to come back probably by early April with all these goodies, and I cannot wait to see all these new tanks operating in Ukraine, including the Leopard 2s, the Challenger 2s, the Leopard 1s. What else? The Bradleys, the IFVs, so the Bradleys and the CV90s, which I absolutely adore because the CV90 is really, really super modern IFV. What else? The Leclercs, maybe you'll see the French Leclercs, and even the AMX-10s, right? Even though it's still debatable if it's a tank or not, I still think now from what I remember, is that France now pledged 40 of them to Ukraine. So if you guys remember, a couple months ago, it was about 10 that France was ready to send of these AMX-10s RCs. And now they're pledging about 40 of them. So whatever Ukraine can get, it's going to be great for this eventual counteroffensive. So lots of good news, and I cannot wait to see them in action in hopefully around April. And hopefully there will be destroying some of these absolutely, I don't even know what this is, to be honest with you, but this is essentially the Russians stapling 25 millimeter universal guns, which are the two M3s, which are normally used on ships, on MTLBs, as you can see. So this is a Soviet MTLB, and they just stapled a 25 millimeter gun that's usually on a ship. This is, the mighty Russian industrial complex. This is the last, thing they can think of. And this shows you how desperate Russians are right now into sending weapons to the front lines. They don't have anything left. The only thing they have left is these Soviet-era vehicles, which they have many of. They still have thousands of these, garbage tin cans, but there's a lot of them, and so there's also a lot of manpower, and so they can continue sending them. But this shows you the state of the Russian army. And so if you think that following this war, they're still going to be recognized as a mighty army, you can forget about it, because their defense industry is going to be absolutely annihilated. They have nothing to work with anymore, and they have zero innovation happening within the Russian army. So this is the last remaining thing they can think of. And on a less positive note as well, this you can see is the city of Marinka, which is south of Donetsk city. And this is the aftermath of 9 years of war with Russia. It's been absolutely pulverized, and this gives me the Lord of the Rings vibes, because of how destructive this war is. And you can see some of these images also in the movie Lord of the Rings, which I love a lot. But I guess the parallel with the orcs is very righteous, because that's exactly how the Russians have been conducting themselves, just pillaging, destroying, and annihilating everything in their path. And so this is what Ukraine fights for, is to get rid of this infestation of Russians within Ukraine. They have no right to be in Ukraine, and they need to be sent back to Russia. And the last video is the Crimean beaches in 2023. So somehow the Russians think that Ukraine is going to do an amphibious assault, which would be ridiculous because Ukraine has no navy whatsoever. But you can see that they've been building trenches all across different Crimean beaches, expecting the Ukrainians are going to be launching an amphibious assault, or perhaps paratroopers. But you can see that the confidence is clearly not high, because so much for a 3-day victory in Ukraine, or even let's be generous, let's say 2-week victory in Ukraine. And now we're at the point where Russians are building trenches throughout Crimea, expecting a counteroffensive happening there as well. So this is just to show you the stupidity that the Russians they have in thinking that this is actually going to help them, building these trench lines all throughout the beaches. And I'm just wondering, obviously Crimea depends a lot on tourism. Is there going to be tourists in Crimea this year during the summertime? Because it seems like this is not something that I would like to see if I was to pay for a trip to Crimea. But it seems like the Russians are panicking. The confidence is clearly not high, and they're expecting some offensive happening in Crimea this year. So that's it, guys. This is the video for today. Please subscribe to my channel if you enjoy my content. It really helps me, making more and more content for you. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you and take care.